one and all, as we celebrate the magic of women in cinema at our Film Coven. We're your hostesses, Kelli Mehan
and Melissa Woody, and today we are bringing Norma Desmond of Sunset Boulevard into our cinema circle.
Oh, Melissa, this has been a while in the making now, but we're finally here. Would you like to tell our audience what we're doing today?
Yeah, so I approached Kelli and I was just like, hey, I loved doing that women's panel and we need to do more of that. And that kind of has now blossomed into this idea of ours, which is now what we're calling Film Coven. And so each episode we're going to be highlighting women in cinema. So we are women highlighting women in cinema, and we're super excited.
And today we jumped in full force with one of the greatest, not just female characters of all time, I would stand up and say one of the greatest characters put to screen of all time, with Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard. I think this came about halfway through our brainstorm, and I just rewatched it recently, and I'm like, well, you know who's like amazing? You're like, that's one of my favorite movies, of course it has to be Norma Desmond we do first.
Yes, it's officially my most logged movie on Letterboxd.
Brilliant. 5 stars?
Yes, every time.
Of course. So today we're going to be talking about Norma Desmond and Sunset Boulevard, and this is a title that we're going to be called It's the Pictures That Got Small. And these types of episodes are where we're going to be focusing on maybe one singular character from a single movie, or characters across a span of movies, but more the character side of things, not a real life person.
When was the first time you watched this movie?
Sunset Boulevard, during my classics run, so I'd say I'd be like 15, 16, and just discovering the classics section of my local video store. I'm from a real small country town, so the classics section wasn't huge, but definitely that DVD boom at least like gave you access to things you might not have had before. So I remember renting things like Breakfast at Tiffany's, Some Like It Hot, which was my first Billy Wilder, Casablanca, just really finding those ones where I love a TV show that's got references galore. So things like The Simpsons or Gilmore Girls, where you almost know all the key phrases or that iconic imagery before you've seen it. So I really tried to make a point of going back and seeing some of those ones that were just so well lauded, just seemed to be in everything. So as I sort of said, I'd seen Some Like It Hot, and I'd seen Sabrina, being a big Audrey Hepburn fan as well. But I love a film noir. When I watch a film noir, I'm like, this is movies. Like it's got such a vibe, and I love a movie that is black and white but lives in grey somehow, and that is just all what noir is. The music, the lighting, the complex characters. So Sunset Boulevard really blew me away, and yeah, I just loved it. The other few times I've rewatched it as well. I don't have a set story for it. I just thoroughly enjoy it. How about yourself?
Yeah, I came to it a lot more recently. I believe I watched it roughly 2 years ago for the first time. Before I joined this community, I really didn't know who Billy Wilder was. And I didn't know as much as I do now about like classic cinema in general. And man, I really wish I knew him a lot sooner, because he doesn't really miss. Essentially every movie I've seen of his, it's been incredible. And yeah, Sunset Boulevard completely blew me away, and I became very obsessed with our main character of the evening, Miss Norma Desmond. Yeah, no, this movie is incredible. Yeah, I wish I got to it sooner, but yeah, I don't really have like a set story, but I think it was just like in the summer 2 years ago, and I was just like, holy shit, this movie's amazing.
Are you like me? Are you someone who enjoys like movies about Hollywood? Like Hollywood stories are really gripping and enthralling?
Oh yeah, no, I am a sucker for a movie about a movie, like absolutely. And then I mean, this movie definitely is like a meta-textual satire on like Hollywood, and it very much blends like fantasy and reality, because we have like silent film stars like in the movie playing themselves.
Oh, yes.
And just a lot of different characters that are like playing themselves, and then characters who are playing themselves in a role. in the movie too. It's just like there's a lot of layers going on.
Yeah, like good on Paramount for like really going in on it and like making it sort of feel as authentic as possible, because I love Singing in the Rain, and that seems to be like the antithesis to this, where like the characters were able to adapt from silent films to making talking pictures, and this is like the sad version of it where that didn't happen really.
Yeah, and naturally I probably like this one more because I love sad things.
Let's get into our leading lady of this evening. As I sort of said, we're talking about like one of the greatest characters at this point. She has a name and iconic lines that almost precede her. I think if you've never seen this film, you've heard I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille, and it's the pictures that got small and things like that. But being a silent film star, she wasn't able to transition to talking pictures. Even in the start of the 50s, some of the dialogue I noticed, she's like, it's a fad. Talking pictures are still a fad. It's been like nearly 20, 30 years at this point. But she's such a recluse that she lives in her mansion built in this heydays of the 30s, this glorious mansion I'm seeing behind you. It's just so beautiful. Living with her butler, Max, and just living off the investments she's had. So she's rich and just choosing to write her, I won't use the term comeback, but her return to cinema as she writes her screenplay for Salome she hopes to make with Mr. DeMille. Melissa, is there anything else about the character that's of note?
I mean, she's just so delusional. She just completely is like accepted that like she really thinks that, you know, the fans are just dying to see her again, and because she gets letters, and we do find out later in the film it's because Max is writing it to her, which is like so sad, but also kind of like lovely in a way that he like is putting so much effort into like cultivating her like fantasy. It's just kind of crazy, but yeah, and I love just her way of how she says words like the garage or like we have faces, like, and she definitely has a way to herself that she almost like comes off like Nosferatu, like with the fingers and like like a vampire. I don't know, like there's things about this film and her and that it almost gives off like a horror vibe, because this is not a horror movie per se, but like there's like interesting elements that feel like horror, like there's a lot of like organ playing and
very gothic centric sort of stuff there, like the house and, as you said, the organ, and the score that backs up this film is just incredible at making those sorts of moments. Shall we get into our magical moments where we talk about the role of the character and her arc in the film? Melissa, tell me about how we first meet her.
Yeah, so we first meet her and she's in her house, and you don't really quite see her. It's like a silhouette, and she's like,
yes!
She's like, you there, why are you late?
Through the shutters of the window, absolutely.
And it's just like, who is this woman? And we come to find that her chimp has passed away because she has a chimp as a pet. But it seemed
how did you first react to that scene?
I thought it was pretty funny because this movie is pretty funny. It's not like, you know, like you're maybe like laughing out loud, but it's like little giggles here and there, and like there's like a lot of dry humor and dark humor for sure. But yeah, no, I I thought it was pretty funny that she's like very serious about this chimp that has passed away, and you know she's gonna give them a proper burial with, you know, she wants like red satin in the coffin, like all these things.
Absolutely. That's one of the notes I made, is that being so particular about the satin and things like that, I think it really sums up the character, where she shows off all this elegance and glamour, but then there's a real tacky side to her as well. And I find that really fascinating, like that little juxtaposition of the character there. It's interesting. But yeah, as you sort of said, like making an elephant in coffin for a chimp is not a sentence I thought I would ever say in my life, but that is what we're attempting to do. And the other part of this introductory scene I find so interesting, and sort of because it's the framing device of the whole film, is that we only get Joe's narration of her. We get his viewpoint of her, and he frames her so much throughout the film. And I like what you were saying about like the Nosferatu hands. I sort of look at it as being really enjoying that we get a writer as our narrator, because he comes up really with really great analogies and metaphors and things like that. So if you can like maybe act out as I'm going, he does the scene where she looked behind me with those dark glasses with that contraption stuck to her finger, a coiled snake ready to strike. But as you sort of said, she sits there with this. So he uses all these like animalistic words for her. So he references her as a coiled snake, but the whole movie, I find it interesting, she's dressed in cheetah print and she seems to have claws the whole time. So I like that we're getting these phrases for Norma. But yeah, that contraption to her finger, she's just sitting there like, it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's just like on her finger, she's like smoking a cigarette off of it. And I will say too, like, I don't want to focus on him too much, but like, I think it's a really interesting to have a narrator that we know that is dead. And so like inherently you trust him right away because it's somebody like beyond the grave that's like sharing this story. Like, why would you lie at that point if you're dead? So it's just like I don't know. The first time I watched this film, it's just like you automatically very much trust this guy because it's like he's just telling a story.
That's a good point. I've never thought of it from that way. So I like that as well. And that's sort of that device of coming, like starting at one point and finding out how we get to that point. I think that can be really effective in filmmaking, and that just adds to this so much because you know how it's going to end. So how did we get there? And when they first meet, that's maybe not where you think it's going to go. That he's just stumbled into her home looking for a place to stow his car, and he sort of manipulates a little bit his way into getting a position with her and ends up, but it's very much, I think he doesn't know what he's in for. He got much more than what he bargained for, because give me the garage line again, please.
The garage.
Yes. He gets his own little apartment over the garage. And then suddenly all his things are there. So we can already see, even though we're not seeing her on screen, her thought process and the way she moves and how serious she is about this project. The other part, I forget it's in it every time until the scene happens, and she says, "What's your star sign?" or something like that. "What are you? When were you born?" "December." "Sagittarians. I like Sagittarians. You can always trust them." Like I love it. I keep forgetting that she's into astrology.
Yeah, no, that definitely like adds something interesting to her character, that like she, believes in astrology, which I don't know. Me personally, I don't know what I really feel about it, but I do think it's interesting, like that there's just so much like I don't know, content out there for astrology. But yeah, no, she I guess trusts Sagittarians. And she's a Scorpio. I think later in the film, she's like, "I'm a Scorpio."
And Jamil is, I can't remember, Capricorn. It's the day for them that's going to be the best for them to meet up. So
yeah, yes.
After we sort of introduced to her, we see her and Joe as they're editing on the movie script, because she hires him to punch up her script basically to do the editing, because he comments offhandedly, "There's 6 movies worth of what she's written here," because she's been in the house for 20 years at this point, planning this film and wanting to do this role, and very protective of her script. If he tries to edit something out, especially, God forbid, if it's a scene she's in, she's in every scene, mind you, she's written herself to be in every scene. So we can't cut that no matter what. Cut me, people want to see me. That is so much fun to do.
Yeah, no, I've been doing this probably all day long, and my husband's like, "Are you gonna stop?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. Absolutely not." But
it's gonna get worse.
No, but I do love when they're kind of reviewing the script, he's like, "I think you need some more dialogue." He's like, and she's like, "We don't need dialogue. We have faces."
Yes, we have faces.
She says that a lot.
And at one point, he sort of says it wasn't all work that they got to play. And a scene that I really like is when the butler Max, he winds up this big oil painting, and she has her own projector theater in her house, even just in the 50s. And this house would have been built in the 20s. Like, I always had that fascination for like secret libraries or, movie screens or things like that. So I love seeing that come out, and he just winds this projector, and the smoke that is filling the screen. And I love that Joe says it. You can guess whose movies we watched every single time.
Norma's.
It's hers. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to see a more softer side of her. So far, we've seen a more hardened side, a more snarky side, a more jaded side. But it's really sweet, the moments between those two, when she's sort of clutching into his arm. And I think he phrases it as just a fan seeing her favorite actress on the screen. And the fact that they use Gloria Swanson's movies, oh my goodness, it's just amazing. What are your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, no, it's incredible that, like, yeah, Gloria Swanson was a silent film like queen, you know, and so it's really interesting, kind of again seeing that blend of like fantasy and reality of her playing Norma Desmond. But yeah, no, this is definitely like it's sweet. Where and it's almost like he's just like not really sure at this point about her. He's kind of like, yeah, she's, you know, holding onto my hand, or like, you know, clenching close type of stuff. And so it's like, is she like maybe hitting on me, or, you know, or is she really? I think ultimately, I think this is where he realizes maybe how lonely she really is. Like the only thing she has in this life was her acting days as a silent film star, and like this means a lot to her too. I like, it feels like it means a lot to her to be like, hey Joe, like watch my movies with me.
Yeah.
even though it seems like very narcissistic, which it is, but like, I don't know, there's also, like you were saying, a sweetness to it as well.
I think he was past the narcissistic moment when he saw all the photos of her in that room as well.
Absolutely. It's like, okay.
I can't think of the right phrasing she's saying, but it's towards the end of that where it's got this moment, the film stops and she's like, and like she's something like, I'm gonna make pictures again, and she stands up. And it just really shows that determination of character. So we've gone from something really soft, but I like the phrasing, the articulation of that she, like, we know where she's coming from now, that she's planning this comeback, and just how serious she is about it as well. One of our other key points, and probably what would be the turning points of the film, is this New Year's Eve moment. So you sort of a little bit already told us about how she might be feeling about him. Tell us about New Year's Eve.
Yeah, so kind of leading up to it, Norma's like, we need to get you some new clothes. So like they go shopping, and like he's kind of weirded out about it a bit. He's like, I don't need new clothes. And she's like, yeah, you do. Like, I need you to be dressed to the nines type of thing. And, you know, she kind of amps up that like, oh, like I'm going to have this New Year's party. And I almost feel like Joe knows that like it's really not going to be like a party, but at the same time, I think, I don't know, I feel like it's like a mix bag maybe, but you know, so he thinks that there's gonna be this party, and spoiler alert, it's just Norma and Joe, and it's really sad, but she's so excited, like she is just like moving to the music, and like they're both dressed really nice, and she gets pretty sloshed too.
Yes.
Like I really like the scene where she's kind of on the couch, like she's like, I'm rich, I have $1 million.
I'm rich. I think new Hollywood trash.
I think she says something like, I own a few streets or something, and I own like an oil company, and like
yeah,
she's just like, and he's like, whatever, like you can keep your money. Like he's kind of weirded out by it all, I think, at this point, which kind of leads him to leave. So maybe tell us what happens next. Where does he go?
So Joe leaves and goes and finds a friend of his, an assistant director called Artie Green. And it just so happens that Artie's girl is Betty Schaefer, who he has met in a previous scene when he was trying to sell a script to Paramount. So she's a reader, and she turned down his ideas, but she wants to be a writer. So we see them start to have a bit of a flirtatious moment and develop some sort of working relationship. And I think we'll talk about it later, but the use of Betty in comparison to Norma I find really interesting in this film, especially from like a female viewpoint, and what the point of her is and like how they're driving things home. But basically, he's having fun, he's living life, he's going to get his things and go. I think at this point he knows he's developing into a kept man. Like you can see it because the man who's trying to sell him clothes is like, well, as long as the lady's paying for it, like why not get the more expensive thing? And he's rocking up to this party of what would be his peers of people in the film industry in this tails suit. So he just sticks out like a sore thumb. So I think he sees it's not going the way he wants. He's going to pull the cord. He calls home to tell Max, bring his things over. He's out. And it turns out Norma has had a suicide attempt as she's found Joe's razor, because another point in the film is that there's no locks on the doors, that Madame suffers from melancholy. So Joe has to rush home to her. So Melissa, how do you find this part of it, like the party scene and him finding out about it?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting that Billy Wilder has two New Year's movies, and they're both very different. Like this one is really kind of similar in a way too, but this one's like very sad versus like The Apartment kind of ends on like a very happy note on New Year's. But no, this is definitely like the midpoint of the film, kind of a very like important part of everything, where it's like, you know, again, at this point you're like, okay, Norma's kind of crazy, but then it's like, oh, okay, like she like seriously like psychologically has some issues, and kind of really taking things to the extreme with him kind of leaving her, and that it broke her heart to the point where she wanted to hurt herself. So it's very, very sad. But I do think it's commendable that Joe goes back, because Joe could have not. He could have just been like, all right, whatever. But so I think this kind of shows that he does have a care for her. I don't know if it's a love, but I think caring for her in a way.
Yeah, this scene and the part afterwards where he goes to is it's really rough for me to watch. Like it breaks my heart a lot, and I'm just very empathetic to all sides of that story. I think that's a really tough situation to be in, and I like the way you phrase it, that like he does have a care for her and he shows a caring nature, because I don't think we've seen a lot of caring nature to Joe in the film so far. So I do think that is a commendable thing. But her still, she knows what she's doing in this scene. I feel she knows what she's doing to make him to stay, and that's hard. But it's just heartbreaking that that's the point that she's at, as you sort of said, because it seems to be this is the first time there's been life back in her house for a while, and she's just reaching out to someone who's there and who she feels a connection with. And yeah, it's hard. It would have been hard for that to let go. So I feel like this scene's difficult in a lot of ways, but important. And as we sort of said, definitely the film turns from this moment onwards.
Yeah, and I really do love how, because during this scene when he kind of walks in, he starts describing her bedroom. He's like ruffles and satin, and then I think he says something to the effect of like, the silent movie queen waving to a parade that has long passed her, you know, something to that effect. And that like line is just so good, because it's so true. Like she just, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but just the whole house, it feels like a haunted house. It feels like a fun house full of mirrors almost, in a way that's like kind of terrifying. You know, there's all these images of her everywhere, but it also just feels so lonely and sad and decrepit in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that house is static. Like her and Max have been living in it, but they haven't been living in it. You know, she still talks about the floors and Valentino dancing on them and things like that. So that's still the mind frame of where she's at. So I love that. Yes, her in her bedroom scene is fantastic. So afterwards, I guess we see that Joe decides to stay, and there's a bit of a change in their relationship. They go back to work on Salome. But they get to have a bit of fun as well. And you mentioned that there are lighter moments of this film. What do you like about the scenes that we see post New Year's?
Oh, I mean, it's just that twist of like the highs and lows of Norma. You know, obviously we just saw her at her lowest moment, and then, you know, a few scenes later here, she's dressed up like Charlie Chaplin, and she's twirling around a you know, umbrella and dancing and performing for Joe, and she's very like close and kind of cuddling with him, and she seems so in love and so happy, full of life. So it's a very like shift from this scene that we just talked about.
Yeah, when I first saw this, and when I've just rewatched it recently, again, I forget that she does this, the Bathing Beauty scene and the Charlie Chaplin scene, and he's not feeling it. Like, he's so over it at this point. But she's living her best life, and I love her just living in her own fantasy world. Like, it's dedication to that, and yeah, when she's not harming anyone, it's delightful.
Yes, exactly.
But I guess our next twist and turn that we see is when she's heading to Paramount. So she's been working on this screenplay. Yes, she's sent it over to DeMille. I think that's right. She's already sent the screenplay to DeMille.
Yeah.
She's waiting to hear from him.
Yeah, and then they call, but, you know, she thinks it's because of the script, but we come to find it's actually for her very vintage, kind of cool looking car. They want to use it for a movie, but she obviously doesn't find that out because she's just so wrapped up that, you know, he wants her in his next movie, and just so like loving the script, but fortunately not the case.
I thought it was really clever that this Paramount visit, that they have someone on the lot who recognized her straight away, like at the security gate. So it's feeding into not the delusion, because it's not a delusion because she's been sent these pictures, but that fantasy that Max has created for her. It's feeding into that because people do remember her. People from the movie industry are remembering her. Like, Joe recognized her almost instantly, and so the security guards that are there that probably worked at her at a time, she goes onto the set, and the way she walks about the set as well, I find so interesting, because it's 20 years later and things are so different, like how much different the technology is and the stage and the sets and things like that. But a lot of extras remember, and then there's the guy who has the spotlight on her, remembers her. She's sitting there. Hey, is that Norma Desmond? So I think that's a clever move, because it shows that the world hasn't completely passed her by, but maybe her 15 minutes of fame are maybe a little bit up. How do you find this scene?
Yeah, no, I mean, okay, I'm sure we'll talk about it here in a bit, but like, love the outfit. Oh my gosh. When she walks on to Paramount, I'm just like, yes, serving looks. But yeah, no, again, this whole like scene, yeah, it's definitely kind of I think reinforcing the fantasy, because it's like they drive in, and then the security guard are like, I think they're like, who's Norma Desmond? Somebody says that, but then somebody else goes, that's Norma Desmond, and and then they're like, yeah, let her in, she's like, you wouldn't even have Paramount without me, something like that,
Yes,
you know how Norma is at this point.
Oh, she is the greatest star.
But then, yeah, when she gets to actually sit Mr. DeMille's like director chair and has the spotlight, and then there's just like a swarm of people around her. It's kind of dramatic. I feel like that's maybe one of the scenes that's a little like unbelievable, but I don't really care. I still love it.
It also gives her the opportunity to deliver that monologue about being grateful to be back. And again, that's what I love about her, is that we see soft and hard, like we get all facets of her, and just so how broken she was before, but then how grateful she is. So I love a Norma Desmond moment when she's speaking softly and sincerely. I think just as much as I love when she's like being quippy and like throwing shade and things like that. But yeah, her being just so touched to be remembered and to be back, and I'm very empathetic to how that would feel, if you've been away for 20 or so years. It'd feel like, and if you were discovered at 16, 17, that would feel like coming home to the set if you were working those sort of brutal days we know that they did in the studio system. So I like seeing her interact with the public is great.
Yeah, because she for the majority of the film, she's at home and doesn't really face the outside world, and I don't think
Yes.
she really wants to.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, no, that's a great point. Like she's an absolute recluse. So seeing her interact and it reminds me of like Hairspray a little bit. Like Mama, welcome to the 60s. Like that's what it
Yeah,
would be like. Like, hey Norma, welcome to the 50s. Like
and there's talkies. They have been for a while.
It's not just a fad. After this visit though, we don't see her very much. When I was watching it recently, I don't know, I kept getting Darth Vader parallels. Go with me here. Only because I feel like it's a very iconic character that you know all their lines and scenes, but is not in the film as much as you think it is.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I feel like that happens to me too when I watch it. I'm like, oh, I mean, I love these scenes, but I'm like, I want Norma back. Because she's just such a scene stealer. It's just like, my gosh, it's hard to not get enough of her. But it probably makes sense in regards to the balance of the film. Probably needs something else to be happening. But gosh, she's just so iconic.
And I think that's the other thing. Like the moment she's in, every scene is iconic. Like straight away, then.
Yeah.
But we get a bit of Joe and working on his script on the side. I think he sneaks out every night, he says, or something like that. So she might play bridge with the other waxworks, the other silent film stars of the era. He goes out and sneaks out and goes and sees Betty because they're working on a screenplay together. And at one point, we don't see her for a while, but she knows that he's sneaking out. And this is probably where we start to get the more villainous side of her really come out, the more spiteful side, the more doing things with intent to be nasty side of her, because she finds Betty's name on the screenplay and calls her up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the screenplay is called, I think, Untitled Love Story or something like that. So I think that probably triggers her. Like what? Like what? Like you're writing a love story without me? So I think that fires her up even more.
So she calls up Betty on the phone. Well, she rings the apartment that Betty's lived at because Betty's also been making calls to the house. And every time Max answers and says, there's no Mr. Joe here, or he's busy, and is doing his best to sort of deflect her and keep Madame happy. But Madame must find out Betty's phone number and rings the room that she must rent or share with another girl. She's on the phone. She gives a very gives me what it was like growing up in the 2000s when you still use the phone and things like that. She basically three-way called her, gives Betty a bit of alluding to, what do you know about the man that you were working with? And she doesn't know, but I think they've just had the scene where they've really bonded on the set together. And she sort of somewhat admits that, yes, I love Artie, but I'm not in love with Artie. I don't want to go to Arizona. Joe and I are going to be together. And so straight away after she's on this high, we get this phone call from Norma that's, yes, very, what do you know about this man? Do you know where he gets his clothes from? Do you know where he gets his money from? What is his address? Very much alluding to the fact that, either he, A, hasn't been very honest with her, and B, Norma's maybe thinking of him as a bit of property at this point. Like, I've paid for you and I support your lifestyle. Why are you not being loyal to me? And insinuating, especially at this time in the 50s, the sort of situation that Joe was in. So Joe walks in and takes the phone and deadpan face. Betty, why don't you come over? You need to see this. And that's the point for him where it's, I'm out.
Yeah. It's kind of like mic drop. Like I can't remember the address, but it's like, 1, 2, 3 or whatever, Sunset Boulevard.
And
then it feels like drop the mic, and then it's like, oh shit, things are gonna go down.
Especially because as we know how the film's going to end from the start of the film, like this is the point. We're ramping up to that climax, and now we get to the scene where Betty's over, and I think he says in his narration that he holds her future in his hands. So he does what he thinks is the admirable thing and is sort of giving it to her bluntly to turn her away, I think, because he sees that she's 22 and has this whole future ahead of her and things like that. So he's doing the things to push her away, and then afterwards he's going to go to Ohio. So Melissa, like, I can't with this scene. Like, I wrote in my notes, I can't make notes. Like, the breakdown that happens when he is packing his things and he just breaks. He mentions it earlier that she's a sleepwalker, and you don't wake a sleepwalker. And this is the scene where he does it. Your fans, they passed you by. Max is the one that sends you all those letters. God, I'm doing her for him. But like, there's just so much gesturing in this film. It's great. It's great. So describe for us the turn that Norma goes through in this scene.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, Joe is throwing bombs left and right, like word bombs, and she, isn't having it. And that's when we kind of go from our beginning scene of Joe in the pool, and she shoots him twice in the back and once in the stomach, and he goes into the pool. I will say one thing that I don't love is there's like no blood, but it's okay.
Like no little red patch, even in black and white, feel like no spooling, like, yeah.
That's like one thing that's like, but again, so iconic, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like it's just kind of unbelievable, like, especially because she's like confessed that she's in love with him a few different points at this point in the film. And you don't typically shoot the people you love, but so I think this just really obviously shows just how mentally unstable she is, and just she's not in reality at the end of the day. Like, she's just so caught up in her delusionment and madness at this point, where I don't even think she really understands what she's done at all.
I completely agree. I see this as like her breaking point. This is where her dreams have shattered, and this is where it twists her. Even though I think she believed that she's the greatest star, this is where now this is what she's living in full time, that she's back to being 16, 17 on the studio lot of Paramount. No one turns their back on a star. Like, we get all those sorts of moments there. And yeah, I agree. I think she doesn't know what she's doing, doesn't know what's happened. And then that's evident in the aftermath of it all, when there's reporters there, Hedda Hopper, everyone like comes in to see Norma, and she feels like she's on the set of Salome now. Like, with Joe's death, that means that Salome obviously has finished writing, and now she's ready to produce it. So we see her in her beautiful ball gown. I love the glitter and everything. And we get this shot, this all-time classic shot of, oh, but now I forgot my lines, and you're all here to see me today, and what's happening? And Max the butler comes in clutch, puts the camera on her and goes, how does he say? Like, Norma, you're on the set of Salome, and it's the time that you walk down the stairs and you come to us. And the music, everyone looking on, frozen in horror as she slinks her way down the staircase. And I think that's just brilliant that everyone is just frozen there as she walks down. And Melissa, give it to us. Give us the final moment.
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
Yes! Smoke, and then the end.
She just kind of like goes into the screen. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think that shot is absolutely iconic for a reason, because we've talked about it the way through, but Gloria Swanson, just coming from silent films, the acting is insane. The eyebrow movement, the widening of the eyes, the emotions, things like that. It just is all cemented in this final scene, and it's amazing. It's sad. It's somewhat scary. It's emotional. It's everything wrapped up into one.
Yeah, it's an all-timer, like, movie in general, but the ending, like, I'm a sucker for a great ending. Like, that will like increase a film's like enjoyability and rating for me. Yes. if they stick the landing, and like, yeah, this is one of the best of all time.
Is there any other moments you want to touch on before we we'll move on to maybe what we really like about the character.
I do love the scene. It's when it's after the Paramount scene, and she thinks that like the movie's going to be happening, and Joe
Yes.
is like, you know, she's training like an athlete for the Olympic Games.
And all the like team of the beauticians that came through. Yes, it's like Miss Congeniality.
Yeah, all the beauty treatments she's doing, and I think at one point she's like, I think I've lost half a pound or something, and she's like, I've really been nervous about my like neck or something. I don't know, it's something to that effect, but it's just like she's so in it and like really just trying every inch and pore of her body and skin. She's like trying to perfect, you know, for this movie that is not happening.
It's not happening. Our next segment we're going to move on to is Drawn to Life. What brings this character to life and what draws us to them? Melissa, we've talked about her in great detail sort of on the way through, but at the end of the day, what do you really like about this character as a whole in the film?
Yeah, so I am a sucker for mad women. I love
I like my women a little bit crazy.
Yeah, like I love films where women are kind of depicted a little insane. And you know, Norma Desmond is definitely one of the best to do it. Yeah, I do love, again, all the highs and lows of her character. You know, every line that she says is like so iconic, and I love the vocal range of how she kind of says things like the garage. I'm just gonna keep coming back to the garage.
Please do. That's how I'm gonna open my mind now when I pull in. I'm gonna come home from school and be like, I've opened the garage.
Yeah, just the vocal inflections of how she says words. I mean, the iconic costumes and like outfits. I'm obsessed with. I want all of her clothes. All the words that she says are great. And yeah, she's a very layered character. You know, she definitely has a sadness to her, and it definitely has like repression of like different things. You know, she wants to be a big star again, but she doesn't want to face the world ultimately. And I think that has something to like say about like, you know, mortality. I don't think she wants to like maybe face death or life really at this point. She just wants to be in her fantasy world. But yeah, she's just endless like enjoyment of this character. The good and the bad, the good and the sad. So
I love that. That is actually one of the key questions I have for you, and something that I found myself wrestling with when we were talking about doing this, and I'm watching it, I'm like, it's really a hard depiction of various mental illness. And once we know mirror the real life experience a lot of silent film actresses went through, because they've been very publicly, when they're writing the script, that they've reached out to people like Mae West and Clara Bow and people like that, Mary Pickford, and like, so this would have been something that was extremely difficult to go through, and the reclusiveness, the depression and things like that. Yeah, I find it hard to then. How do you personally feel about Norma being labeled as a villain or an antagonist? Because I feel like mixed, because I feel like this movie is full of complex gray characters. I feel like if you label Norma a villain, that means you're labeling Joe a hero, and I don't think that suits either. I think everyone just has their own motivations and things like that, but at the same time, she's such great cinema, and we don't get a lot of like female characters that go in this way, so I don't want to take that away either. How do you feel, Melissa?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a tough question. It really is.
It is.
But I mean, I don't really view her as a villain or a hero. To me, she's just a human that's like going through some great suffering and a lot of pain. I think there's a lot of pain kind of that she's holding inside and maybe not releasing, and just I think natural desires to, again, I just think she's a very repressed person, and she's very stuck. She's stuck in the 1920s, and that was 30 years ago, you know, at this point of where the film takes place. And so And it's hard because, you know, I'm sure, I see that with people in my own life, and it's difficult to watch, you know, when someone's a little stuck, in their place in life. So
Yeah, and then the actions that sort of result from that, because obviously we get the climactic scene. That's not great.
no, so unfortunately, it's not. Yeah, it's
Um,
not a happy ending for her, but you know, it is iconic, and I do enjoy it.
Something we've been excited to get to the whole film. Let's move on to technically speaking, where we're going to talk about things like script, which we've been mimicking the whole time because it's so good. Script, cinematography, score, soundtrack, and please start us with the costuming. Tell us about the costumes.
So you might have heard her before, Edith Head. She did the costuming for Norma, and man, she knocked it out of the park. Like, yes, there's other people in the film, and I think she helped with some others, but I think the main focus and the star of the show is Norma. And just, yeah, that my favorite outfit by far is the Paramount outfit with like the veil with like the
Veil.
feather. It's just so great. Obviously, I like the leopard turban look as well. Yeah, just so many great looks in this movie. Yeah, Edith Head, legend.
Yeah, I sent you that quick video about someone on Antiques Roadshow having like the Edith Head sketches and the proper swatches and things like that. Because we've mentioned it before, but costuming just tells us so much about the character without saying anything. It tells us their viewpoints, it tells us where their history, where they've come from, and how they're feeling in the moment. So I like what we're introduced to with the leopard and the fur cuffs and things like that. But as I sort of said earlier, it's elegant and tacky at the same time. And I just think it's fabulous. It's just so good. We've talked about costumes. How do you find the script? I mean, we've just been imitating it the whole time, but some of the most iconic lines you're going to hear with I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
Yeah, I mean this script is like so tight. I mean it's perfect. I really don't have any critiques whatsoever. I think again, Billy Wilder is a very talented director, but he also helps with a lot of writing with his films. And you know, yeah, the script is incredible. I mean, the quotes are great, and just the way that he's able to build these characters, and especially Norma that we've highlighted tonight. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say anything else about it really, but it's incredible. Yes.
This is one of the first movies in black and white that I want to see like solely in black and white when I was younger. Like, because you know everyone has that misconception of, oh, it's black and white and it's old and it's not going to be very good. But like I feel like this just shows that format of what black and white can truly offer. Because it's not that I'm opposed to a color version, but I just think the choice of lighting in this is just so important. And the scene I think of is that movie theater scene where she stands up and she's surrounded by that smoke. She's standing in front of the projection heading to the screen, and it just looks phenomenal. Like, what are your thoughts on some of the shots in the film?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would not want to see this movie in color personally. I don't know. Is there an option for that for
I don't
this?
think so, but like, you know, they
Okay.
colorize It's a Wonderful Life and things like that.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched it because I don't really want to watch it either for that one. No, I just like you said, I think black and white does have power to it, and with a noir film for sure, like I feel like it sets the atmosphere of it all. And yeah, the shot that you just talked about is definitely one of my all-time favorites. And I feel like seeing that in color when it maybe hit as hard. And then also just the house. I mean,
Yes.
I'd be curious to know, like they talk about colors, you know, like the red satin for the for the coffin, and she has satin and ruffles in her bedroom and stuff. So I'd be like curious to know what it would kind of look like in the house specifically. But at the same time, like I think it just adds to that gothic feel and kind of mysterious feel of the house with the black and white cinematography.
Let's talk about the score, because this is one like I couldn't name you the composer. I've read it, but it's not one that like I know off the top of my head. But it's just the theme that they give Norma Desmond is phenomenal because it's eerie and it's mysterious. And I feel like there's hints of flair in it from Salome, like what it would be like if she could finally portray her character. But there's the moments that we like get those close-up shots of her and her theme plays. I just love, it's a good noir score that backs up everything that's happening. It's heavy on percussion and it's heavy on horns. And yeah, I really like the score for this one. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have much to add, but yeah, like it definitely adds again to the atmosphere and the vibe of this movie. And I mean, that's the power of score. I feel like music can really heighten the storytelling, and I think that's what it's doing here, for sure, with echoing Norma Desmond's character essentially through music, and so it just kind of emphasizes her character. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, when she's like at the heights of melodramatic moment, we get that like, and it just really hits home. Like everything works with her posing, with the score and everything. I think it's fantastic. We do have another very key female character in the film of Betty. Betty, we're introduced to, as I said earlier, as a reader, but she's almost our antithesis to Norma. She is young and fresh-faced, and there's a lot of emphasis on that. And we find out later on that she tried to go into acting because she comes from a film family, but after they fixed her nose with her nose job, then she just couldn't act. So she went into reading and wants to be a writer. And I do like this character because she's very ambitious. It seems like she has her head on her shoulders and has a dream and is taking all the steps necessary to make that a reality. What do you think of, I think it's Nancy Olsen and Betty Schaefer in this movie?
Yeah, no, she definitely adds levity to the movie because the stuff with Norma is pretty heavy. Obviously she, hurts herself at one point, and in the ending of the film, she hurts somebody else. So she's definitely a complex character. But no, Betty definitely feels like a lot lighter. She does come from a family that's like in the movie business. And I do love kind of the intro to her character as well. She basically like thinks that Joe's story sucks. and she has like no problem kind of saying that, and I love,
she doesn't back down that. Which is great. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like the part of her character that is kind of frustrating is that, like, she is this ambitious character, and she has her own opinions, and she wants to be a writer. Like, that's her trajectory that she like wants to take, but then she kind of gets infatuated with Joe, and I feel like it kind of gets a little muddled for her. So it's a little frustrating, but I get it. She's I don't know, seeing rose-colored glasses with him or something. I'm not really sure, or maybe sees him as a way to get to her career faster or something, and that seems exciting to her. It's hard to say, but just that infatuation with Joe is a little frustrating from her character standpoint, in my opinion.
I found it similar because when you meet her, she's in the office, but then you re-meet her at the party and she's with Artie, and she's like, they're going together, but she's like a little bit flirty with Joe. But I feel like there's a line, and it's playful banter. It's not so much like take your girl sort of stuff, but then definitely later when they start writing together, it gets to that. But we're engaged, and she seems very, I'm on that track. And I sort of thought that was a really good, I was hoping they would keep going with that, where it's like, yes, I get it that you're handsome and a writer and stuff, but we're not going to be tangled. And then, but you can't get that emotional crux of the film if you don't start heading in that direction. So I get it. But I did like that at first, it was that, no, that Artie's my fella and all that, because Artie just seems like a really nice guy as well. Like, that poor guy.
Right. And because I will say that I've grown to like Betty more. On my first viewing, I kind of was annoyed with her like more. Again, it's like through my rewatches, I enjoy her character more, because I kind of was like, what are you doing? Like, like, I thought you had your goals and you have a fiance. Like, why are you trying to throw this all away for Joe? But.
Yeah. Melissa, that's wrapping up our episode on Norma Desmond and Sunset Boulevard. Is there anything that we didn't get to talk about today that you'd like to bring up?
Oh boy.
I know, it's just, there's so much there. Like, we could do like a 3-part series on this character, really. We chose such a whale of a topic for our first episode.
You know, we're very ambitious too, so we just came out like slaying. Yeah, no, I don't know. There's something, but I can't think of it at the moment, to be honest. How about you?
Yeah, there's just been so much we've said, and yet so much still to say about this character. It's an enduring character. It's a legacy character. I think it does help, as we were sort of saying at the top of the episode, how we like films about films. So does Hollywood. Hollywood loves its own films about films. So this will be a character that is long lasting. And I hope that everyone at some chance gets a chance to connect with her. I watched it with my mum, and she'd never seen it before.
Oh,
and she's so I watched it with Alid recently, and I watched it with Mum recently, and they both really enjoyed it and wouldn't have normally been something that they would seek out. But I think it's worth it. I think if you've heard just anything about the name of Sunset Boulevard or seen this character, that you've got to watch the film and have a go at it. So this is one that I look forward to generations that will keep coming back. Like, we've had the chance to not be from the time of it, but come back and be like, wow, I see this character. And I think she's a fascinating character, and that's what I like to see, and that's what the legacy is going to be, hopefully.
Norma Desmond, she truly is one of the best, if not the best, female character like on cinema or in cinema. Like, just incredible. And if you haven't seen the movie, you should check it out. I don't know why you're watching this episode, but thank you. So you should go watch. You should go watch the movie.
Well, to echo that, like, thank you for watching our first episode. Stay tuned. We have so much brainstormed still to come. We have different formats we want to try. So please come back, give us a watch, give us a listen if that's a go. So stick with us, see who else we're going to invite into our Film Coven, which other amazing female characters and women who work in cinema that we're going to choose to highlight. Just a big thank you from Melissa and I. Melissa, take us out.
Thank you for joining us for our first episode, and stay magical, everyone. Bye. I like it.